and welcome back to another video. Today we have this PS1 board. As you can see from the title, I'll be adding a mod chip to it. However, there is an extra step that I have to do for this one in particular. As this is a Japanese console, there are additional protections through the BIOS chip here that I'm currently applying thermal tape around. So we'll be replacing it to allow for region-free games. For this specific board being a PU22 model, luckily there aren't many capacitors around that could blow from the heat, but just to be safe I'm adding a good amount of tape around, mainly to make sure no small pieces get blown away. I skipped past it, but you will have to remove the metal shield covering this area, but there are just a few legs being held down that you just have to remove. It's not too difficult, outside of one or two being in weird positions. Just one more piece of tape here, and with everything decently protected, I'll go ahead and get things set up. I have the board here held in place, and I'll just apply some flux. This is going to take a bit of time to heat up, so we'll just zoom past this. There we go. Well, at least almost. Just gotta give it a bit more heat over here to get these last few legs off. Phew. Probably could have given it a bit more time, but luckily all the pads seem to be intact, so I'll just keep that in mind for next time. Getting a closer look here, not too shabby. Here's the chip itself. There's some wonkiness going on in the top right with those legs, but it's still in one piece, so I'll take it. Switching over to a microscope here to get a better look. Definitely still some bits left over, but I'm happy with it. Still in the learning phase and all. Once again, going to apply some flux to help pull up whatever's left behind and give some fresh solder to anchor the new chip to. Just press the tip against it for a second to get those pads looking nice. Going up top, these two pins are bridged a bit. Let's just deal with that. Well, I guess it was too good to be completely true, but at least it's still attached. This last one here looks a bit sketchy as well, so I'll try to be a bit careful as I prep it. But for the time being, I'll just move the broken one to the side and get these other pins retinned. Luckily all those were fine, but now to try and put this guy back in position without completely ripping it. I'm starting to be a bit too much of a perfectionist, trying to get it as good as possible, so I eventually come to my senses and just leave it decent enough. Here is the replacement BIOS chip, courtesy of Modsville, USA. This would be a bit easier with the pad not being torn, but just keep going back and forth from the top and bottom until it's lined up just right. Since we're going into soldering, you always want to use flux. So just drop some in there and we're just going to tack it down. Don't worry too much about getting a solid connection, as this will just allow you to keep the board in place. Let me just get a bit more there. Now we can go to the top. The angle isn't super great. I probably should have flipped the board. As you can see, I'm getting the second pin there as well. I decided to try and go for the second pin there and managed to bridge the two. It's not a super big deal, I got it separated, but it's not pretty. So I accept defeat and go back to the bottom for now. Here's where I start to get into a groove and really get a hang of things. So I'll just speed things up and enjoy the soldering. This flux is pretty good about not needing to be cleaned, but I gave it a nice scrub anyways with some IPA. Getting a better look though, I'm pretty happy with the results. There was some bridging that took place during the setup, but luckily none were difficult to fix and it all looks good. Even that pin that got torn settled in nicely, so I'm glad I didn't make it too much worse for myself. I don't know when this happened, but I guess I got a bit lost and applied some heat to the disc lid detector there. No serious damage, just got some character added to it. Just one more look at the side here before taking a quick check just to make sure it still functions. Don't mind the screen, that's just my TV. And I'll skip through some of the load time. It turns on just fine, but it produced a lot of buzzing, which didn't sound too great. I'll worry about that later, but let's just see if a Japanese disc still loads normally with Soul Edge here. Skipping past the load up again, and it works just fine. Now that it still has the normal function, I want to try out an American disc, just to see. I'm sure it still needs the mod chip, but for my own curiosity, well, as I expected it didn't spin, but good to make sure either way. Back into the micro zone, I have the mod chip here. This is a PSNee, also courtesy of Modsville USA. But we have these 2 points up here, labeled ground and 3.3 volts, that go down over to this guy here. The top half needs to connect to the 3.3 volt, and similarly with the ground plane to the bottom half. So we get the point prepped with some flux, and get a wire primmed in position. I used a wire stripper and had some difficulty with it being such a small size, but it worked out in the end. Just have to get it in position, and I struggled for a good portion of this section as I continue to get comfortable with such precise work. Trying to keep the board, the wire, and iron in place is no joke. In hindsight, I should have tried to tape them in place, and will do so in the future to save me the time. But here I'm tinning the wire with some solder to help it more easily stick as solder wants to join with itself. I should have placed a blob down on the chip before trying to connect it to the point, and going forward I do that. But it still worked out fine, and I just have to go back and redo it for a more solid connection. You can see how shaky I am, so I award those that can do it so smoothly. Maybe someday. I even had to just back off here to get a better angle. But having the iron rested against it and moving the wire in place, I managed to set it in, with sloppy fashion in all fairness. But going to the other end of the wire, I'll snip this off and prep it just the same. Now, if you have a keen eye, you may notice I'm in the wrong position. And you'd be right, because I'm too far up on the incorrect diode. So instead of going through all that, I'm just going to skip to the next one where I actually put it in the right place. Correctly this time, we have pin 3, which slides all the way down this way, through these legs, and rests down on the bottom left point. I'm not knowledgeable enough to tell you why it goes to this point, or what gate underscore WFCK is in reference to, but eventually I'll try and hit the books. For now, we just grab a wire and slip it through this nice pathway. Just keep feeding it through to give it as much slack as we need. Back at the chip, that's perfect. I'll snip the edge to reveal the wire, tin it up, get a nice solder blob, and tack it down. Don't forget to apply some flux either. Now, same as before, we snip the end of the wire, and since we're in a tight area, I tried using the snipper here to tear the cover off. It's quite a bit more difficult and took a good amount of attempts, but it did work. I'll need to do some more practicing to figure out the best way to go about it. Here I show off some shoddy techniques as I try to get the wire into a good enough position. But once I do, it's the run-of-the-mill flux, tin, and solder. Afterwards, I'll just push the wire down a bit into a better position. Okay, on to number 7. This is another distant guy going on the other side of that same chip, down to this point just under 53 on this model. It just makes me happy sliding this wire through so cleanly. Help! Anyways, this one has a bit further to go to reach its destination around this capacitor. With the wire exposed again, I'll just skip to the last bit as I've done it a few times now. And here's the other end being soldered as well. Now similarly with the ground and 3.3 pads, 6 and 5 go to coinciding points on the board. 6 connects to the upper pad, while 5 goes to the lower one here. The solder point here is a bit messy, so I'll try to clean it up a bit. So I have once again jumped further ahead because I made another mistake of mixing up the connections. Something about the 2 points being close together just scratches my brain weirdly, I guess. So we have those 2 messed up and the initial 2 as well that have to be corrected. Just double checking the others to make sure they're okay. A bit of solder on the side, but we're good there. And same thing on 3. Starting off with 5 and 6, I'll just go ahead and unsolder these wires one after the other. These wires are close enough together that I can just switch them without having to replace them. So now 5 to the bottom, and crossing 6 above it. I'll just solder that in as well. A bit messy at first, but ended up solidly. For this diode, this is the one we actually need to solder to. Unfortunately, that does leave this spot unnecessarily messy, but there shouldn't be any issues outside of appearance. First one came off nicely, and now let's see if this one will be as easy as the others and can reach. Took a bit of straightening, but it should have just enough slack to reach. I do have to improve with solder now hanging off like that. I assume it's just too much solder or having to put it on the iron itself as opposed to bringing the solder to it, but I digress. If all goes well, this should be the last wire, and I'm done. Though it's not that easy, as with how it's angled, there's no shot this will reach. With that out of the way, let's go for the final time with this wire. Cut, and boom. Now everything should be connected correctly, and we can jump out of the microzone. Back to normal view, definitely the more difficult of the two, but does have less potential for error than the bioswap with messing up the pads. Overall, with a bit of practice on some dud boards, I think I did alright, though I do need to make sure I'm more aware before doing the work so I don't end up having to add another hour to the job. Now for the moment of truth, will it play the WWF disc? Still powers on, and it's loading it up. Disc is spinning, but hey, let's go, success. Now just to be safe, let's check the Japanese disc as well. It'd honestly be pretty funny if somehow it just switched. But nope, I have a fully functional, region-free PS1. Nice. Now I only have 20 more PS1s to go. Will I mod them all? Probably not, but I guess only time will tell. Other than that though, thanks for watching. This is DiveFixer, shutting down.